like I'ma wear 'em. Ain't got the shoulders for the burdens I'm bearing. Broke down and pulling over by the wayside. Was never made for this type of way, so I throw my hands up and my load gets lighter. I throw my hands up and then burn like fire. Float up to heaven like the smoke in the air. I flip my worries into prayer, leave 'em right there.
Make your heavy light, don't worry at all. This love is always right on time. I've been trying to figure out my own way, trying to put it all on me. Way down by the pressure, without looking up, I know you see me. Cause on and on you keep blessing me, but on and on I keep worrying. Why I'm always running when you're telling me don't worry. Just lay it down, it's not your fight. Don't worry, it'll be alright.
So welcome. I'm grateful that you're able to travel all the way to Greece, to the island, the Santorini island with me. The blue domed homes there that are built into the cliffside. We're getting ready to watch the sunset, and I'm excited that you're here with me for that. Actually, I'm pretty happy that you're able to wait in line with me here at the Unclaimed Baggage Warehouse in Scottsboro, Alabama. I'm going to go through here and see if I can't find some cool luggage for my next trip. I am not going anywhere, but it's fun to dream. Or I could be in Camden Yards, or getting ready to enter Camden Yards, Baltimore, Maryland, a 7th inning stretch. I just stepped outside to get a Coke and a hot dog, and then walk back inside and watch the Orioles beat Tampa Bay. Used to be the Devil Rays, now the Rays. I still call them the Devil Rays. It's just the way I do it. Or I could be in, let's see, what's a place that I could be in that you would not know? How about the Museum of Bad Art in Boston, Massachusetts? That's probably pretty believable. I think you would look at me and think, Jason would go and see bad art on purpose. I'm in none of those places and all of those places at the same time, because for our purpose for this Sunday, it's to not confuse you, but to open up your imagination. Hey, where's Jason? Well, we'll let you know where I am. But more importantly, where are you? You're sitting at home. You're drinking your coffee. You've just hit the share button with your friend and said, hey, I know you're not paying attention, but I feel like this is something that you might want to pay attention to. We're encouraging you to ask the question, where am I? Well, where are you? Where are you in your faith? Where are you in this friendship, this saviorship that you have with Jesus Christ? Right now, I'm just excited that you're sitting here with us, about to step into a place of worship. It's an attitude of worship. I'm grateful that you're here with us. Welcome to White Plains.
As we come into the story of the parable for this week, it follows closely behind. Jesus is walking the Galilean hillside, speaking to crowds, teaching the disciples, helping them understand so much of God's kingdom. It follows immediately behind the parable of the sower, which, if you've been with us, you saw was the one we focused on July 18th. You might want to go back and take a look at that one because it has an important meaning, many important meanings for most of us. This one has some similarities, but it has a truth for us to understand, truths on many levels for us to begin to see and to grasp all its own. Again, Jesus is telling the story, the parable, to help us better understand God, ourselves, and others. He, meaning Jesus, told another story. God's kingdom is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. That night, while his hired men were asleep, his enemy sowed thistles all through the wheat and slipped away before dawn. When the first green shoots appeared and the grain began to form, the thistles showed up too. The farmhands came to the farmer and said, "Master, that was clean seed you planted, wasn't it? Where did those thistles come from?" He answered, "Some enemy did this." The farmhands asked, "Should we weed out the thistles?" He said, "No. If you weed the thistles, you'll pull up the wheat too. Let them grow together until harvest time. Then I'll instruct the harvesters to pull up the thistles and tie them in bundles for the fire. Then gather the wheat and put it in the barn."
Hey, so you don't always see me for these prayers in a t-shirt, but you see this? I got this at Lake James, which is up near my hometown of Morganton, North Carolina. And this hat here, I got in Knoxville, Tennessee, at a convention one time. And it's really cool because when I go places on vacation, and it's the time of year that we take those vacations, right? I like to pick up a souvenir, a hat, a shirt, something that reminds me of that place and that time. That got me to thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we could have some sort of a tangible souvenir, like a shirt or a hat or a coin or something, that of a time and place that we felt like we were especially close to God? We go somewhere on vacation, we have a wonderful experience, and we bring something back that reminds us of that time and place. But think of all the times in our life that we've been close to God, or the things that God has gotten us through, and yet we have no record of it except for our memories. Maybe we should write down and start a prayer journal right now for answered prayers. Times that we prayed for something to happen and God was there with us in that prayer. I don't know about you, but there's memories that I have that I would like to have written down what I was feeling in that time. As we go to God in prayer, consider starting a journal. Consider writing something down or marking something that would say, right here, God was with me. Let's pray. Lord God, you are with us at all times, in the high times and in the low times of our lives. We know you're there, and we can feel you almost tangibly with us at times. Help us to remember in whatever ways are helpful, writing down, drawing pictures, telling stories, the times of our lives that you are with us. And help us to look for you always, not just in the hard times, but in the joyful times as well. And Lord, wherever we go this summer, this fall, this winter, wherever our journeys and our travels take us, always bring us back together safely as a community of faith, as family, your family. In Christ's name we ask all this. Amen and amen.
Letting go of every single dream. I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I've tried to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary, but I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight. No matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I need you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answer, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. It's not a day you have not seen. So in all things, keep my life in bread. How much you unloaded, nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I needed you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answer, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand. You are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place where I'll go. You never let it When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answer, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust
All Jesus did that day was tell stories, a long storytelling afternoon. His storytelling fulfilled the prophecy, I'll open my mouth and tell stories. I will bring into the open things that have been hidden since the world's first day. Jesus has an important word for the disciples and for us. Jesus dismissed the congregation and went into the house. His disciples came in and said, "Explain to us that story of the thistles in the field." So Jesus explained, "The farmer who sows the pure seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The pure seeds are subjects of the kingdom. The thistles are subjects of the devil, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, the curtain of history. The harvest hands are angels. The picture of thistles pulled up and burned is a scene from the final act. The Son of Man will send his angels, weed out the thistles from his kingdom, pitch them in the trash and be done with them. They're going to complain to high heaven, but nobody is going to listen. At the same time, ripe, holy lives will mature and adorn the kingdom of their Father. And then Jesus turns to them and to us and says, are you listening to this? Really listening?
God, I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. And after all this time, with you by my side, I can't imagine what it'd be like on my own. And I've made up my heart, this love is all I.
How are you today? Thank you for joining us here at White Plains and our kind of teaching time that we offer here online every weekend. We're so glad you could be part of us. For those of you who are home folks, welcome. We're glad you're here. For those of you tuning in the first time, we're glad you're here as well. We're also worshiping in person now every week, so we'd love to have you there as well. So come by, join us in person. We're doing a transitions worship experience. And just a word for those of you who do, some of you are coming to both, and we're glad you can do that. Pray for churches around the world right now. I can't speak for around the world, but I know in North Carolina and typically in the United States, churches are having a difficult time because people psychologically just by and large aren't ready to be in person yet. And so worship numbers in person have just are not even at a third of what they were previous to the pandemic. However, we are fortunate enough to have this medium where we can still stay in contact and in community with one another. And so we're grateful for that. But if you're ready and if you've been fully vaccinated, we'd love to have you in person worship. And we'd love to have you at White Plains if you're looking for a church home or a place to worship. So we'd love to have you, but we're grateful for your being present here today. Well, we're continuing this series that we started a couple of weeks ago about the stories of Jesus. Those who are Bible students often hear it called parables, the parables of Jesus. This particular parable, this parable about sower in the night and weeds and the farmer and the harvester, has some really different kind of characteristics about it. This story of Jesus has strangely two entries. We'll talk about more later. And this story also really at its core is about control and trust issues that, I don't know about you, but boy, do I have to deal with. And so it goes to the real heart of most of us, control and trust issues. And then in this particularly deals with some real justice issues. I don't know about you, but when I see some things that people have done that are really dastardly deeds, I want them to get theirs. This has to deal with some justice issues. And then the question we always want to leave us with is, where are you? Where are you? Because the thing we want us to discover is there are various characters in every story of Jesus. And where are you in those characters? We are one of these characters. What I've discovered is I want to be the most flattering character, but the truth is at some point in my life, in points where I'm not even aware, I'm often the most unflattering character. And then also what I think is the most flattering character can be the most unflattering character. So we want to talk about those things today and find out in this parable, in this story of Jesus, where are you? Where am I? Well, first, Jesus is coming off a whole time that Jesus is teaching. And the first thing we want you to know is there are really, generally speaking, three main ways that Jesus enters these kind of storytelling times, these parables. There are directly Jesus being asked a question and Jesus responds, and he responds with a story, a parable. That's not one of these. Then there are situational, where Jesus is reacting to a situation and he tells a story or a parable in that reaction of what's happening around him. But in this case, and in the case before this text before this, Jesus is directly teaching. He wants his disciples and you and me to know something, and he's directly teaching us through story, through parable. And in this one, he's actually saying, my kingdom, my reign, my world, this is what it's like. And I want you to know, if you want to be part of my world and part of my kingdom, this is what it's like, and you need to know it, and you don't need to act any other way. And this is the expectation I have of those who are following me. You know, I think sometimes we hear some of the things of Jesus, and if you're like me, you kind of say, well, you know, I'm not Jesus. There's just no way I can live like that. Well, folks, the hard truth about this, it's not optional. We want to be like Jesus and want to be part of his reign and to be a follower of his. So we'll get to that in a minute. So this entry, Jesus has been teaching. He is telling this story where he is telling about his kingdom. He says, my kingdom is like this. And he said there's a farmer, and he has planted his wheat, and the wheat is growing, but during the night, somebody evidently has come and has spread weeds. And his farmhands come in and said, hey, boss, did you plant bad seed? Because there's weeds everywhere. And he says, no, somebody must have come in and spread those. The servants, the farmhands say, well, do you want us to pull the weeds? He said, for heaven's sake, no, don't do that. Because if you pull the weeds out, you'll pull some good stuff too. So that's kind of the entry, that's the story. He tells this whole story, and then he kind of leaves it there, and the text says he leaves the master that he's teaching, and he goes in the house. Well, his disciples, the people, his close friends, follow him. And they get in there and they're kind of scratching their heads about this farmer and wheat and weeds. And so they go in and they say, Jesus, what did that story mean? So that's the second entry point. What does this mean, Jesus? And with a smaller group, a more intimate group, Jesus is telling what this story meant. Then it's after that he tells us the meaning of that and tells us what this means for them and for you and me. He says, if you have ears to hear, you better listen to me, because this is vitally important for your life, in my reign, and for my community. So listen, and listen carefully, and take heed and do what I tell you. No question about it. Years ago, back in high school, as a matter of fact, I was on a retreat, a teenagers retreat, high school boys retreat. And a good friend of mine, Mark, we were just headed out in the woods. It was a pine forest, and it was a lodge in a pine forest, and we were just walking down this path and just goofing off. And we were walking and just goofing off and just doing boys crazy stuff. And it was before dinner. It was in late evening, probably around 4 o'clock or so. And he was behind me. We're just japping, and we just crossed a log, pretty much like this one. And it was an old pine log that had fallen. I crossed the log, and I turned and was talking to him. And as I turned, I went up to him and I said, no! And I pushed him down. I shoved him down on the ground. He went on his rear end, down in the mud. It's Florida. And he's kind of yelling at me at first. And the reason I shoved him down was, as I turned and looked back at him, right there in the crevice of that log that we couldn't see was a rattlesnake. I'd stepped over, and about the time I stepped over it, the rattlesnake realized we're there, and it started moving to get in a circular fashion, just enough time for me to shove Mark out of the way. And he fell on his rear end, and I got out of the way. Well, shoving somebody down is not a very nice thing to do. You don't do that to people. But you know, forever, Mark would often say, Ray saved my life. Well, I don't think that was true at all. But I did it. Maybe kept him from getting bitten by a rattlesnake. The rattlesnake was over 6 feet long. Biggest one I ever seen in the wild. Now, why do we tell you that story? It really didn't look at me, because that scared me to death. Scared Mark to death too. The reason I tell you that story, it's kind of like this story that Jesus is telling us. I knocked Mark to the ground as a preventative measure. It wasn't to be mean, it wasn't to be ugly. It was harsh, it was hard, but it was keep him from harm. It's to keep him from getting bitten. Is to keep him from possible death even. What Jesus is saying, before we go down that road and pulling weeds up, we can nip this in the bud and not do this behavior so that we're not harming others and thus harming ourselves. He said, just don't go there, folks. It's none of your business. This is not who you need to be. You could be pulling up people, you could be harming people. Don't do this. So one of the questions I failed to ask you earlier today was, where am I? You folks that are carry people, have you figured out where I am? Well, I'm near the Morrisville area at Good Hope Farm. It actually belongs to the town of Cary, and it's kind of a public farm, and it's a beautiful farm that Cary has preserved, and you can come out here and enjoy the farm. And so that's where we have been, Good Hope Farm, and out at Carpenter Farm Road in that area. And there's another beautiful park right across the street, so come out here and enjoy the park, beautiful walk around. And so that's where we are, where we've hung out for the past couple of days. The farm is a beautiful place, and you know, in a farm you're usually planting in rows, and the rows are distinguishable. They're usually up high. That helps prevent crowding of weeds and other things to get in there. A few weeks ago, we're at Eno River Farm, and so that the strawberries can grow and things aren't crowding around them. They also have plastic to protect them, and so they can control water. It's a real science to it. But now at my house, we don't get into all those science things, but I love to work in the yard, and those of you who are home folks know that. But in those plants and those rows and all of that sort of thing, in all gardens, you can get some weeds. And that's what this story of Jesus, this parable of Jesus, is about: weeds and how it can hurt the produce, the farm, what you're trying to get to grow, like the wheat. Dr. Lee was just telling me that, did you know weeds are the number one harming thing for produce that hurts the farm is weeds? That's what hurts the farm more than anything. Yeah. I am just obsessed with weeds. Almost every single morning. I kiss my wife goodbye. I walk her out to the garage, and the garage door goes open. I put her coffee in the car and I kiss her goodbye. She backs out of the driveway. You know what my next thing is? I go to my beds in my yard and I start doing this. See these things? Hate it. I'm out at the farm today. All these stinking weeds. I start pulling the weeds out because I don't like any weeds in my garden. I don't like them in the flower beds because I hate them. I have containers, always spray containers that has some chemical in it to kill these weeds in my area that has all kinds of pine straw because I just can't stand the weeds. And so I go out there and I do that. And so when I'm doing that, I'm trying to get as much weed as possible out of the garden. And, well, that's not supposed to happen. And I've done that sometimes, where I get a little bit too aggressive and I pull something that I didn't mean to pull. And Jill, my wife, will sometimes say, "Why did you do that?" And I say, "Well, I didn't mean to." Jesus is teaching this. And he tells us in this story, the reason he tells this story, and the disciples say, "What is that all about?" Because in the story, the owner of the farm, he tells his work hands not to pull the weeds because they're apt to pull some good stuff with the weeds. Because what happens is when you pull those weeds, you can dislodge some of the good produce. You can dislodge some of the good stuff, and you'll pull the good stuff with it. And Jesus is not willing to let one good piece of produce, not one good life be lost. We said earlier this is a lot about, or at least some about, justice. You see, Jesus compares this, or what is Jesus saying is, there are weeds. There is bad stuff in the garden. He said the field is the world. The weeds are evil. So the justice part is there. You let me be in charge of the justice. You don't need to be bothered with that. It's really none of your business. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I want to be in charge of that. I want to pull the weed and discard it. But the hard truth about this is, Jesus is telling me it is not mine. It is none of my business. Now I have a word for my conservative friends and my liberal friends. Now, just so all of you who don't know me well, I can just tell you I'm really good at getting all those parties really upset with me. Weeds are weeds. For my conservative friends, I know we will say, "Well, you got to pull those out." Well, I'll admit that there is evil and they are bad. I'm not saying there aren't, nor does this text. But what this text says is, it is not my place. Because I can't tell the wheat from the weeds. I might think I can, I might know I can. But God says I can be wrong. Totally wrong. And so I need to sit in the back seat, sit down and shut up and let God do God's business. I don't like that, but it's just truth. Now, for more liberal friends, when I say, "Well, just let people be people." Well, no, evil is in the world and weeds are weeds and they are evil, period. I don't like that either. Because I want everyone to be good, I want to love everybody, and I'm called to love everybody. But the truth is, there is evil and it is bad. And God says, I will separate that out. And my justice is my justice. And I just got to trust God with that. I don't know what God's going to do with that. And it's none of my business. Because I do not have the mind of God, nor do you. But what I do know is this. My call is to love God and to love people. just seen some weeds, some that garden, some of the rows that were not weeded, some that have been burned. This is a difficult kind of story, kind of parable that Jesus teaches. You know?
I think this one is pretty easy to understand.
It's easy to understand. It's
I think
just
it
difficult to hear.
Right. I think what happens is the real question for me is, do we hear this parable and then just ignore it? Because I think we do. I think most of us do.
Well, hear it and just kind of move on.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying if I got a chance to say what I think happens, because I think we just say, okay, God's the judge, gotcha, and we go on our lives, but we don't perhaps we don't really push that out of our lives and really say, okay, God's in charge, God's going to be judging now, tomorrow, the next day, forever, and I will step out of that. I just think it's one of those we hear and we go, okay, got it. I understand the meaning of that. God's the judge. And then we go on and do the same stuff. We go on and immediately start judging people. As soon as we're done, as soon as we've heard it and we've agreed with it, then we go on. I think we do it. And Lee?
Yeah, I just thinking while you were talking, we aren't the only ones that had a hard time. And we've talked about characters helping us get insight into ourselves as well as what Jesus is teaching. Yeah. And I think the gospel writer helps us see this. Because just a couple more chapters over, they're still walking, preaching, teaching, and they're over in a region where there are a lot of Canaanites. And if you remember, the Canaanites are the folks who inhabited the land before the Hebrew people came. They were people of many gods. They were seen as Gentiles who were not to be admired or to interact with or have anything to do with. They were the weeds in the way that they would have been thought about in that time. So in this story, Jesus has an opportunity to make a point to the disciples. And just maybe we can see ourselves in that place too. A Canaanite woman who lived in that region came up to Jesus. "Son of David," she cried out, "have mercy on me, sir. My daughter has a demon and is in a terrible condition." But Jesus didn't say a word to her. His disciples came to him and begged him, "Send her away. She's following us and making all that noise." And then Jesus replied with a bit of a sarcastic tone, "I have been sent only to the lost sheep of the people of Israel." At this, the woman came and fell at his feet. "Help me, sir," she said. Jesus answered, again, with maybe just a touch of irony here, "It isn't right to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered, "That's true, sir. But even the dogs eat the leftovers that fall from their master's table." Jesus turned to her and answered, "You are a woman of great faith. What you want will be done for you." And at that moment, her daughter was healed. Wow.
So what really hits me at first is, I think for people to understand, is this is a Canaanite woman, as you said, and
Canaanite woman.
So she was weed.
Yeah. The disciples have heard this parable, and they're in
Actually,
this
three
moment,
times.
right?
Yeah.
And they're in this moment, and they still shoo this lady on. Now they're doing the very thing Jesus said, don't do that.
Yeah.
They're doing it, and they don't even flinch. And they're not mean-spirited. This one can sneak up on you.
Right. You're not even aware of it.
You can ignore it without even realizing you're ignoring it, and you just it becomes like it's the pool the disciples were swimming in. It's just the stream they're in, and until they're in a moment where they get rebuked by Jesus. Because make no mistake, that's a rebuke from Jesus.
Absolutely.
You have more faith than these guys who were pushing you out.
Oh, can you imagine the embarrassment? And I make no mistake, there is right and wrong.
Sure.
Correct.
We don't, and that's where we
Correct.
get so messed up.
Right.
I know there's
It's
right
not
and
that
wrong.
The weeds turns out they were all flowers.
Yeah, no.
There's still weeds at the end of the story that will be gotten rid of. The parable is a control and trust parable.
Right.
Like, are you going to try to control this? By the way, that's what our problem was in Genesis 3.
Amen. That's right.
And
I wanted to
on and on
On.
and on.
And are you going to trust God? Because somewhere we think if somebody's not drawing lines right now, it'll be chaos.
Right. The front part of this is really surrendering to God. The back part of surrendering to God is, do you really trust God? And do you really trust God or yourself more to decipher the wheat and the wheat? I don't know about you, Lee. I don't know about you, Jay. But I do not trust myself to choose between wheat and weeds.
I don't know, Ray. Look, some of us do trust ourselves.
Well, I'm not. Well, I do in my flower beds.
But in the end, what starts as letting go becomes a place of freedom. Okay, God,
Oh.
you're going to take care of, you will take care of all that? And good is still good?
I don't have to.
Okay, all right.
I don't have to.
I will trust you.
Say, Lord, all I have to do is love people. That's
Amen.
all you ask me to do is love people. Lord, thank you. You get through the hard stuff. I get to love people. And even the people that are hard to love, I just show them mercy and grace and love them.
And you know, I'm even thinking too, and then maybe if I can remember that word, wait, when I'm feeling, like Jay said, not thinking, I'm feeling like I just can't stand to have that person be a part of it. Maybe if I wait, God can take that to before and get my attention.
Or their attention.
Or their attention.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Or their attention. And in that waiting, the trust will come back to that place that I need it to be.
So where are you? Where are you?
My dad's pastor, a few appointments back, used to say, Joe, we don't clean the fish before we catch them. We just catch them. It's how can I share Jesus' love with you? That's it. That's what we're responsible for. We were created in God's image to reflect God's image in the world. And what's the image of God? Well, God is love. That's your job. You've got one job. So take this week and go into the world and tell them Jesus sent you. Well, thank you for worshiping at White Plains.
I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was younger, I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was stronger, I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was younger, I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was stronger. Ooh la la.
So let's deal with these entries and exits. I'm gonna hold up because I don't know how this garbage truck's gonna be.
which we used in the message for September. Sorry, we're going to start over. It's not September.